Your smartphone feels like a product of pure modern genius. But what if its basic idea is thousands of years old? We are about to explore 25 astonishing moments where ancient cultures seemingly predicted our world. From a 2,000-year-old computer to myths of flying machines, we will see how artifacts and stories from lost civilizations point directly to the technology we hold today. By the end, you will see history not as a straight line, but as a spiral where ancient ideas echo into the future. How could a Greek legend describe a robot or a Chinese device detect earthquakes centuries before the science was known? The real question is this: how much of our modern innovation is actually a rediscovery of forgotten ancient dreams? The first clue lies at the bottom of the Aegean Sea. In the year 1900, sponge divers off the coast of the Greek island Antikythera discovered a shipwreck from the 1st century before the Common Era. Among the statues and pottery, they recovered a corroded lump of bronze and wood, so encrusted it seemed like worthless debris. It took decades for researchers to realize they were holding the most technologically complex object from the ancient world. This is the Antikythera mechanism, a device so advanced it rewrites our understanding of history. Using advanced imaging techniques like X-ray tomography, scientists have peered inside its calcified shell to reveal a miniature universe of precision engineering. They found at least 30 interlocking bronze gears arranged in a complex system that functioned as a hand-cranked analog computer. This was not a simple calendar. It was a dynamic model of the cosmos. By turning a handle on the side, an ancient Greek could watch pointers move across dials to predict the positions of the sun, the moon, and the 5 known planets. It could forecast lunar phases and, most astonishingly, predict solar and lunar eclipses years in advance. The mechanism even accounted for the irregular orbit of the moon using a clever pin and slot gear that mimicked celestial mechanics. This was a machine that computed the future of the heavens. Its existence implies a lost lineage of scientific instrumentation, a tradition of geared technology that vanished for over 1,000 years. The principles it used to model astronomical cycles are the same foundational ideas behind modern orbital prediction software and mechanical computers. It stands as a silent bronze prediction of computational machinery, a ghost in the machine of history asking us how such knowledge could appear, only to be swallowed by the sea and forgotten. That ancient computer was not the only device whispering of forgotten science. In the basement of the National Museum of Iraq sits a collection of small, unassuming clay jars, each about the size of a fist. They were unearthed from a 2,000-year-old Parthian village near Baghdad, and for decades they were simply catalogued as storage vessels for sacred scrolls. But in 1938, a German archaeologist named Wilhelm Koenig took a closer look. Inside each jar he found something strange, a rolled copper cylinder sealed at the bottom with asphalt, and within that cylinder an iron rod. The iron rod was suspended perfectly in the center of the copper cylinder, not touching it at all, and crucially, the asphalt seal showed signs of corrosion from an acidic liquid like vinegar or wine. When Koenig reconstructed one and filled it with such a liquid, he made a startling discovery. The arrangement of 2 different metals in an acidic electrolyte created a simple galvanic cell. It produced a small but measurable electric charge around 1 volt. This was the Baghdad battery. The implications are electrifying. If these jars were indeed batteries, their purpose remains one of history's great puzzles. One compelling theory points to contemporary artifacts from the same region, exquisite silver objects plated with an impossibly thin, uniform layer of gold. Modern electroplating works on the exact same principle, using a weak electrical current to bind gold particles to a silver surface. Could ancient artisans have used arrays of these clay jars to generate enough current for gilding? It is a tantalizing possibility. While some skeptics argue they may have been used for religious rituals or storing sacred herbs, the precise engineering of the metal components suggests a functional purpose beyond simple storage. This humble clay pot, predating Alessandro Volta's official invention of the battery in the year 1800 by over a millennium, stands as a quiet, contentious prediction. It suggests that the fundamental spark of electricity, the very force that powers our modern world, might have been tamed not in a European laboratory, but in a Mesopotamian workshop, its secret lost to time and buried in the dust. The power to command fire is one of humanity's oldest dreams, but one ancient empire turned that dream into a weapon of absolute terror. For over 700 years, the Byzantine Empire guarded a military secret so potent it could decide the fate of entire fleets. They called it Greek fire, and its very description sounds like something from a science fiction nightmare. This was not simple burning oil. It was a sticky, liquid concoction that, once ignited, could not be extinguished with water. In fact, it burned even more fiercely on the waves, turning the sea itself into a sheet of flame. Historical accounts from besieged enemies describe a liquid fire that was projected from bronze tubes mounted on the prows of Byzantine warships. Operators would use a hand pump to force the mysterious substance through these tubes, where a permanent flame at the nozzle would ignite it, creating a roaring jet of fire that could engulf an enemy ship dozens of feet away. Imagine the sheer psychological horror for a medieval sailor, seeing a stream of fire arcing across the water toward you, knowing that diving into the sea offered no escape. The exact formula was a state secret of such immense value that it was known only to a few members of the imperial family and a single artisan clan. It died with the empire. Modern historians and chemists, however, have pieced together likely ingredients based on descriptions of its behavior. The base was almost certainly naphtha, a crude form of petroleum which made it sticky and buoyant. The true genius, however, may have been the addition of a chemical like quicklime, which ignites upon contact with water. This would explain why throwing water on it only made the inferno worse. This was not just a weapon, it was a sophisticated chemical delivery system. The pressurized siphons used to project it were the direct ancestors of modern flamethrowers, and the weapon system as a whole represents a chillingly early form of chemical warfare and naval propulsion. In its terrifying efficacy, Greek fire predicted the future of incendiary weapons and the strategic use of chemically enhanced fuel. It was a controlled, weaponized flame that defied the natural element of water, a technological leap that would not be seen again for centuries. From the roaring flames of naval warfare, we move to a whisper locked inside a book. In a vault at Yale University lies perhaps the world's most perfect literary mystery, a manuscript that has defied every attempt to understand it for over 600 years. This is the Voynich manuscript, a 240-page codex from the early 15th century, bound in vellum and filled from cover to cover with words no one can read and pictures of a world that does not seem to exist. Its text is written in an elegant, flowing script using an alphabet of around 25 unique characters, arranged in a pattern that follows the statistical rules of a real language, yet matches no known tongue on earth. The illustrations are even more baffling. Page after page depicts botanical specimens of impossible plants, with bulbous roots and fantastical leaves that no botanist has ever identified. Other sections show intricate astrological charts featuring unfamiliar constellations, and elaborate diagrams of what appear to be biological or cellular systems, with networks of tubes and spheres that eerily resemble microscopic life or even human anatomy. One of the most persistent theories suggests this is not a hoax, but a sophisticated code protecting advanced, perhaps dangerous, knowledge. Could the strange plants be encrypted formulas for medicines or chemical compounds? Do the tubular diagrams represent a lost understanding of physiology or cellular biology, concepts not formally developed for centuries? The very act of creating such a complex, internally consistent cipher mirrors the foundational principles of modern cryptography and data security. It is a system designed to make information accessible only to those with the key, protecting secrets across time in a way that parallels our own digital encryption. The Voynich manuscript stands as a prediction not of a specific technology, but of the entire concept of information warfare and secure communication. It is a physical testament to the ancient human desire to hide knowledge, to encode it so completely that it becomes a puzzle for the future. In its beautiful, frustrating pages, we see the precursor to every password, every encrypted message, and every digital vault, a 600-year-old challenge that asks us if we are clever enough to finally hear its whisper. Deep within the stone walls of an Egyptian temple lies a carving that has ignited a modern debate about ancient power. In the crypt of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a 2,000-year-old bas-relief shows a strange and compelling scene. A giant, elongated bulb-like shape rests on a stand. Inside it, a snake stretches its body along the length of the bulb, its head touching one end. This serpent is held aloft by a pillar with human arms, and a cable seems to run from the base of the device to a box where a baboon god stands guard. To many who see it today, the interpretation is instantaneous. This looks exactly like a giant, archaic light bulb. The snake is the filament, the pillar is the socket, the cable is the wiring, and the box is the power source or battery. Proponents of this ancient electricity theory argue it is a clear technical diagram, a prediction of contained electric lighting hidden in plain sight for millennia. They point to the absence of soot in many deep temple interiors and tombs, asking how such places could have been illuminated by flickering torches or oil lamps without leaving any trace. Could this carving be the answer, a lost secret of the pharaohs? Mainstream Egyptology, however, offers a profoundly different symbolic reading. Scholars explain that the scene is a well-known cosmological motif. The bulb is not a bulb, but a lotus flower, a sacred symbol of creation and rebirth in Egyptian mythology. The snake is the god Harsomptus, representing the primordial life force, emerging from the lotus just as the sun god was believed to rise from a lotus at the dawn of time. The supporting pillar is the Djed pillar, a symbol of stability, and the cable is actually a chain of papyrus stems, symbols of Lower Egypt. The entire tableau is a stone prayer depicting the moment of creation itself, not the operation of a lamp. This clash of interpretations is where the true prediction lies. Regardless of its original meaning, the Dendera carving predicts our modern obsession with technology. It shows how we project our own world onto the past, seeing familiar shapes in ancient symbolism. The very fact that a 2,000-year-old religious image can be so convincingly read as an electrical diagram speaks to the universal power of the light bulb as an icon of human ingenuity. The ancient Egyptians may not have had electric lights, but in their art they created a perfect vessel for a future idea, a symbol so potent that it would one day be mistaken for its own blueprint. High above the scorched plains of southern Peru, a mystery is etched into the very skin of the earth. The Nazca lines are a sprawling gallery of geoglyphs covering nearly 280 square miles of desert plateau. From the ground, they appear as shallow grooves, mere scratches in the dark surface gravel that reveal the lighter soil beneath, but ascend to the sky, and the true scale of the vision reveals itself. Gigantic, perfectly straight lines run for miles across the landscape, intersecting with geometric precision. Among them, colossal figures emerge, a hummingbird with a wingspan longer than a jetliner, a spider with legs that curve in exact proportion, a monkey with a spiraling tail. These are not small drawings, they are monumental earthworks designed on a scale that can only be comprehended from an aerial viewpoint, a perspective the Nazca people, who created them between 200 before the Common Era and 600 Common Era, supposedly never had. Mainstream archaeology offers compelling explanations rooted in the culture that made them. The lines likely served as sacred pathways for ritual processions connecting ceremonial sites. Many align with key astronomical events, like the solstice sunrises or the rising of certain star clusters important to their cosmology. The animal figures probably represented deities or constellations, their creation an act of devotion, a way to communicate with the gods by marking the land itself. The methods were well within their capability, using simple surveying techniques with ropes and stakes to achieve their stunning precision over generations. Yet, the sheer audacity of these designs, invisible to their own makers, begs a tantalizing question. In the 1960s, author Erich von Däniken proposed a theory that captured the world's imagination. He looked at the long, ruler straight lines and the vast, flat trapezoids cleared of stones and saw something familiar: runways. His controversial suggestion was that these geoglyphs were not messages for the gods, but signals and landing guides for ancient astronauts, extraterrestrial visitors who needed clear navigation markers from the sky. He framed the animal figures as identifiers for specific celestial travelers. While this extraterrestrial hypothesis is widely rejected by scholars due to a complete lack of evidence, its cultural impact reveals a deeper prediction. The Nazca lines, in their very form, predicted the fundamental human need for aerial navigation and large-scale geographic marking. Centuries before the first hot air balloon, the Nazca created what we would now call geospatial markers. Those long, straight lines function, in essence, like the runway lights at a modern airport or the directional markers for aircraft visual guides for something moving through the air. They are a prehistoric assertion that the land itself could be engineered to communicate with the sky. Whether for gods or for imagined pilots, the Nazca people built a landscape-scale manual for a viewpoint they could not physically achieve, an ancient prediction of the day when humanity would finally take to the air and look down, seeing their messages waiting across the vast, silent desert. Long before we built wings of metal and engines, we dreamed them from feathers and wax. The Greek myth of Daedalus and his son Icarus is one of our oldest and most haunting stories about technology. Imprisoned by King Minos in the labyrinth he himself designed, the master craftsman Daedalus conceived a desperate escape. Looking at the birds soaring over the sea, he realized their prison had no roof. He fashioned 2 sets of wings from gathered feathers, carefully binding them together with thread and sealing them with wax. The instructions were simple yet precise. Fly the middle course, Daedalus warned his son. Do not fly too low where the sea's damp spray could weigh down the feathers, and do not fly too high where the sun's heat could melt the wax. It was a perfect, poetic lesson in balance and the limits of materials. We all know what happened next. Overcome with the ecstasy of flight, Icarus soared higher and higher, drunk on the freedom of the sky. The sun's heat softened the wax, the feathers came loose, and he fell into the sea that now bears his name. For centuries, this has been taught as a simple fable about hubris, about the dangers of overreaching. But to see it only as a warning is to miss its profound prediction. At its heart, this is not a story about failure. It is a story about staggering success. Daedalus and Icarus did fly. They escaped their stone prison using human ingenuity. The myth validates the core concept of manned mechanical flight itself. It imagines a technology born from careful observation of nature, from engineering with available materials, and from the sheer, unstoppable human urge to ascend. That dream, first given form in this ancient tale, never died. It is the same dream that animated Leonardo da Vinci's sketches of ornithopters, that fueled the Wright brothers' experiments at Kitty Hawk, and that drives engineers today developing personal jetpacks and vertical takeoff vehicles. The specific warning about the sun's heat even finds a strange echo in modern aerospace engineering, where vehicles must be shielded from the extreme temperatures of atmospheric re-entry or the cold vacuum of space. The legend of Icarus predicted the entire psychological and technological arc of aviation. It captured the exhilarating risk, the necessary precision, and the ultimate triumph of leaving the ground behind. Every pilot who has ever looked down at the clouds, every passenger gazing out an airplane window, is living in the world that Daedalus first imagined in his prison cell, a world where the sky is not a barrier but a destination. These ancient dreams of flight were not confined to Greek shores. Far to the east, in the epic Sanskrit poems of ancient India, the skies are already crowded. The Mahabharata and the Ramayana, composed over 2 millennia ago, are not just stories of gods and heroes. They are filled with detailed accounts of vimanas, magnificent flying chariots or palaces that traverse the heavens. These are not simple metaphors. The texts describe them with startling technical specificity. Some vimanas are said to be circular, with portholes and a dome moving with a melodious sound. Others are described as long and cylindrical, like great shining arrows. They are powered by an energy source referred to as mercury vortex engines, or the element of mercury, and they are capable of astonishing feats. Passages speak of them ascending vertically into the sky, disappearing from sight in an instant, and traveling vast distances between continents. They are said to emit smoke and roaring noises, to be capable of hovering motionless and even of cloaking themselves from view. Most strikingly, the Mahabharata recounts great aerial battles between vimanas, describing weapons that sound unnervingly familiar. One passage speaks of a single projectile charged with the power of the universe, a blazing column of smoke and flame as brilliant as 10,000 suns. It describes an iron thunderbolt, a gigantic messenger of death that reduced an entire race to ashes. The corpses were so burned they were unrecognizable, it says, and their hair and nails fell out. Pottery broke without cause and the birds turned white. After a few hours, all foodstuffs were infected. To a modern reader, this is a chillingly precise description of the effects of a nuclear blast, the blinding flash, the radiation sickness, the fallout. So how do we interpret these vivid accounts? Mainstream scholarship views them through a cultural and spiritual lens. The vimanas are seen as powerful allegories for spiritual ascension, vehicles for the gods that symbolize divine power and mobility. The epic battles represent cosmic conflicts between order and chaos, good and evil. The descriptions, while vivid, are poetic devices meant to convey the unimaginable scale of divine warfare, not to document historical technology. Yet, the sheer consistency and physical detail of these descriptions have fueled a more speculative line of thought for centuries. Could these passages be a form of technological memory? Proponents of this view argue that the texts are recording, in the only language available to ancient observers, encounters with advanced aerial machinery. The circular shapes with domes, the vertical takeoff, the roaring sound and smoke, the aerial combat, they all predict the core concepts of modern aircraft, helicopters, and even rocket propulsion. The mercury vortex engine description has led some to theorize about a lost form of propulsion based on gyroscopic or electromagnetic principles. Whether you see them as profound myth or garbled history, the vimanas of the Sanskrit epics perform a remarkable function. They predicted the human conquest of the skies not as a distant dream, but as an established operational reality. They imagined a world where the air was a theater of travel and war, filled with complex machines, long before the first hot air balloon timidly left the ground. In doing so, they gave ancient voice to a future we have now built, leaving us to wonder if our jets and rockets are inventions or simply rediscoveries of a sky once already crossed. Guarding the shores of ancient Crete was a sentinel unlike any other. His name was Tolos, a giant forged entirely from bronze, a gift from the gods to protect the island of King Minos. According to the myth, this towering automaton was the creation of Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, who crafted him with a singular, unyielding purpose. 3 times each day, Tolos would march around the coastline of Crete, his bronze eyes scanning the horizon for any approaching ships. If he spotted a vessel, his programming was terrifyingly simple. He would hurl massive boulders to smash the hulls of invaders, or he would heat his metal body to a fiery glow, embrace the enemy sailors, and burn them alive. This was not a living creature, but a machine. Ancient sources describe his internal workings with surprising specificity. He was animated not by blood, but by a single vein of ichor, the golden fluid of the gods, which ran from his neck to his ankle and was sealed shut by a single bronze nail or plug. His power source and his off switch were one and the same. The story of his defeat hinges on this very engineering. The sorceress Medea, arriving with the Argonauts, deceived Talos. She promised him immortality, but instead removed the vital plug. The ichor, his life fluid, drained out, and the great bronze giant crumbled to the ground, a heap of inert metal. This ancient tale is a stunningly clear prediction of robotics and programmed intelligence. Talos is described with the language of mechanics. He is an autonomous system, performing a repetitive patrol and response cycle without need for rest or command. His internal ichor is the precursor to hydraulic fluid or electrical power, the essential energy that animates a machine. Most importantly, he has a defined function and a fatal flaw in his design, a literal kill switch. In Talos, we see the blueprint for every automated defense system that followed, from medieval clockwork guards to modern autonomous drones and sentry robots. His humanoid form predicts our own centuries-long quest to build robots in our image, machines that can patrol, assess threats, and act. He embodies both the promise and the peril of artificial guardians, incredibly powerful, yet vulnerable to those who understand their core programming. The myth asks a question we still grapple with today. What happens when we create a protector so perfect in its duty that it cannot tell friend from foe, and how do we ensure we always hold the plug? The myths of automated guardians and flying machines reveal a world dreaming of complex machinery. But one ancient inventor moved beyond myth to build a device that predicted a cornerstone of modern public safety. In the year 132 of the Common Era, a brilliant polymath of China's Han Dynasty, Zhang Heng, presented the emperor with a gift that seemed to defy logic. It was a magnificent bronze vessel, nearly 6 feet in diameter, adorned with 8 dragon heads spaced evenly around its rim. Below each dragon, a corresponding bronze toad sat with its mouth open, waiting. This was the Hufeng Didongyi, the world's first known seismoscope. Its purpose was not to predict earthquakes, but to detect them from hundreds of miles away, at a time when messengers on horseback were the fastest form of communication. The court must have been skeptical. How could a silent, ornate jar in the capital city know the earth was shaking in a distant province? Then, one day, it happened. A dragon head suddenly clattered, releasing a heavy bronze ball from its jaws. The ball fell with a loud thud into the mouth of the toad below. Zhang Heng's device announced an earthquake to the west. Yet, in the capital, the ground was perfectly still. No one felt a tremor. Days later, a messenger arrived, exhausted and covered in dust, reporting a devastating earthquake in a western commandery hundreds of miles away. The direction matched exactly what the dragon had indicated. The court was astonished. The device had not just detected the quake, it had pointed toward its origin. The genius of Zhang Heng's seismoscope lay hidden inside that beautiful bronze casing. While the exact mechanics are lost, the most widely accepted theory, based on later Chinese texts and modern reconstructions, points to a beautifully simple inertial system. At the heart of the vessel, a heavy inverted pendulum was delicately suspended. When seismic waves from a distant earthquake traveled through the ground and reached the instrument, they would cause the base to shake. But the heavy pendulum, due to inertia, would tend to stay still. This relative motion would trigger a clever lever mechanism connected to just one of the 8 dragon heads, the one oriented toward the source of the tremors. That lever would open the jaws of that specific dragon, releasing its ball. This was more than a clever trick. It was a fundamental leap in understanding. Zhang Heng had grasped that the energy of an earthquake travels in waves through the earth, and that these waves have a direction that can be measured. His device transformed an invisible, terrifying force of nature into a tangible, directional signal. In doing so, it predicted the entire modern science of seismology and the global network of monitoring stations we rely on today. Every digital seismograph that pinpoints an earthquake's epicenter, every early warning system that gives precious seconds before the shaking arrives, operates on the same core principle Zhang Heng mastered with bronze and pendulum nearly 2,000 years ago. He built not just a machine, but a new way of seeing the world, one where even the silent earth could be made to speak its secrets. While Zhang Heng listened to the earth, another legendary mind sought to command the very sun. The year was 212 before the Common Era, and the great city of Syracuse in Sicily was under brutal siege by the Roman Republic. Defending the city was its most brilliant citizen, the mathematician and inventor Archimedes. According to accounts written centuries later by authors like Lucian and Anthemius, Archimedes did not just build catapults and cranes, he built a weapon that turned sunlight into fire. The legend describes him constructing a massive array of highly polished bronze shields or mirrors. These were not randomly placed, they were arranged in a precise parabolic formation, each one angled to catch the rays of the sun and reflect them toward a single, distant point. That focal point was the wooden hull of an invading Roman warship. As the story goes, the concentrated beam of solar energy grew so intensely hot that the ship's timbers first smoked, then smoldered, and finally burst into flames. Imagine the terror of a Roman legionary, seeing a distant glint of bronze on the city walls, only to feel an unnatural, silent heat growing against his ship until it erupted in a blaze from a cloudless sky. For centuries, this tale of Archimedes' heat ray was dismissed as pure myth, a fanciful story to amplify the genius of a great man. The technology seemed impossibly advanced for the ancient world. How could bronze mirrors be polished smooth enough? How could they be aimed with sufficient precision from a shaking city wall? The logistical challenges appeared insurmountable. Yet the core idea refused to die because it is scientifically sound. The principle of using reflective surfaces to concentrate solar energy is the foundation of modern concentrated solar power plants. These facilities use vast fields of mirrors called heliostats to focus sunlight onto a central receiver tower, generating immense heat to drive turbines and create electricity. The ancient prediction was not about the mirrors themselves, but about the fundamental concept of harvesting and weaponizing sunlight. In 2005, a team from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology decided to put the legend to a practical test. They used 127 ordinary square mirrors, each about a foot wide, and focused them on a wooden replica of a Roman ship's hull from a distance of about 100 feet. Within 10 minutes, they had a fire. The experiment proved the concept was physically possible. A later television show, Mythbusters, attempted a similar test and initially declared the myth busted, but they later revisited it under more controlled, ideal conditions and conceded it was plausible, if extraordinarily difficult to execute in the chaos of a real siege. The truth of whether Archimedes actually burned a fleet may be lost to history, but that is almost beside the point. The enduring power of the story lies in its prediction. In that legend, we see the first clear conceptual leap from seeing the sun as a god or a source of light to seeing it as a reservoir of raw, directable energy. Archimedes, whether he built it or not, was credited with imagining a solar technology so potent it could reach across the water and start a war with a beam of light. That is not just a weapon idea, it is the seed of an entire energy future waiting 2 millennia for us to build the mirrors big enough to make it real. The silent earth and the burning sun were forces to be mastered from the outside, but in the mountains of Greece, an ancient tradition sought to unlock answers from within the human mind itself. High on the slopes of Mount Parnassus stood the most revered site in the ancient world, the sanctuary of Apollo at Delphi. For over 1,000 years, kings, generals, and common pilgrims made the arduous journey to consult the oracle. They came not for a reasoned analysis, but for a direct line to the divine, delivered by a single woman known as the Pythia. Before giving her prophecies, she would undergo a mysterious ritual. Seated on a three-legged stool over a deep fissure in the temple floor, she would breathe in rising vapors described as a sweet, intoxicating scent. She would chew laurel leaves and sprinkle herself with sacred water. Then she would slip into a profound trance. In this altered state, she would speak in riddles, cries, and fragmented verses, which male priests would then interpret and deliver to the anxious supplicant waiting outside. Her pronouncements shaped history, from the founding of colonies to the outcomes of wars. For centuries, this was pure mysticism. But modern geology has offered a startlingly physical explanation for the Pythia's divine madness. In the late 1990s, a team of scientists, including geologist Gel de Bouwer, investigated the underlying fault lines at Delphi. They discovered that two major faults intersect directly beneath the ruined temple. Such seismic activity can create pathways for gases to rise from deep within the earth. Analysis of the spring water and rock formations in the area pointed to the likely presence of light hydrocarbon gases like ethylene. Ethylene is a sweet-smelling gas, and in low doses it can induce a trance-like state, feelings of disembodiment, euphoria, and intense visions. It fits the ancient descriptions perfectly. This suggests the priests of Apollo may have, whether by accident or careful observation, discovered a natural geological phenomenon that reliably altered human consciousness. They institutionalized it, building their entire ritual and their global reputation around this fissure and its vapors. This was not a prediction of a specific gadget, but a profound prediction of a core modern idea, that our state of consciousness can be chemically modulated to access different kinds of information or perception. The Oracle of Delphi represents an ancient, ritualized technology of the mind. It parallels our own scientific exploration of neurochemistry, from the use of anesthetics and antidepressants to the modern research into psychedelics for treating trauma or enhancing creativity. We are still seeking, in labs and clinics, what the priests of Delphi found in a rocky cleft, a key to unlock the hidden chambers of the human psyche. The Pythia, breathing the earth's breath, was the instrument of a system that understood intuition could be engineered, that the boundary between the mundane and the prophetic might be crossed not by magic but by chemistry. Roman concrete did not just endure the centuries, it grew stronger in their embrace. While modern concrete structures often crumble after 50 years of saltwater exposure, the ancient Roman harbor at Caesarea Maritima has spent 2,000 years submerged in the Mediterranean, its piers and breakwaters still intact. This is not a story of superior craftsmanship alone, but of a lost material science so advanced we are only now deciphering its secrets. The Romans built an empire of stone and mortar, and their signature material was a concrete mix far more sophisticated than our own. Modern Portland cement relies on a chemical process that leaves it brittle and prone to cracking, especially when exposed to water and salt. Roman engineers, however, used a different recipe. They mixed lime and volcanic ash, a material they called pozzolana, scooped from the slopes of volcanoes like Mount Vesuvius. They also included chunks of quicklime, a highly reactive form of lime, directly into the mix. For centuries, the purpose of those lime clasts was a mystery, dismissed as a sign of poor mixing or inconsistent quality. Recent research using advanced microscopy has turned that assumption on its head. Those tiny white chunks were not a mistake, they were the genius of the design. When seawater inevitably seeps into microscopic cracks in the Roman harbor concrete, it triggers a delayed chemical reaction. The water interacts with the pozzolana and, most importantly, travels into the lime clasts. This causes the lime to recrystallize, forming new mineral structures that literally fill the crack from the inside out. The concrete does not just resist damage, it actively repairs itself. It is a living material in a slow, chemical sense. The Pantheon's massive, unreinforced concrete dome, still the world's largest for nearly 2 millennia, stands as a testament to this self-healing capability. It has weathered earthquakes, invasions, and the relentless Roman climate without steel rebar to hold it together. Its survival was written into its recipe. This ancient technology is a direct prediction of one of the most exciting frontiers in modern materials science, self-healing infrastructure. Today, researchers are developing concrete that contains bacteria or microcapsules of healing agents. When a crack forms, these capsules break open, releasing compounds that solidify and seal the breach. The goal is to create bridges, tunnels, and buildings that can maintain themselves, drastically reducing repair costs and extending lifespans. The Romans achieved this not with biotechnology but with geochemistry, using the reactive power of volcanic earth and lime. They empirically invented a smart material, a concrete that senses its own damage and initiates its own repair. We spent centuries believing our technology had surpassed theirs, only to look at their 2,000-year-old harbors and realize we are just beginning to catch up to an ancient, waterproof wisdom written in ash and lime. Before the whir of processors and the glow of screens, computation was a tactile, physical act. The most enduring symbol of this ancient calculation is not a machine of bronze gears, but a simple frame strung with beads. The abacus, in its elegant minimalism, is one of humanity's oldest and most profound predictions of the digital world. Its origins stretch back over 4,000 years to the dusty plains of Mesopotamia, where early accountants used clay tablets marked with lines to track grain and livestock. The Romans refined it into the handheld calculi, a grooved board with sliding stones, but it was in China, perhaps as early as the 2nd century before the Common Era, that the design we most recognize was perfected. The suan pan, a wooden rectangle with rods, each holding beads that could be flicked up and down, separated by a central bar. Its operation is deceptively simple, yet its logic is the bedrock of computing. Each rod represents a place value, ones, tens, hundreds, and so on. The beads below the bar have one value, the beads above another. By moving them, a skilled user can add, subtract, multiply, and divide with astonishing speed. But what is truly happening here? The abacus does not compute on its own. It is a memory aid and a logic engine. The beads store numerical values in a clear, visual state. The user, through a learned set of rules, manipulates those states to arrive at a new result. This is the fundamental concept of a register in a central processing unit, a place where data is held before an operation changes it. The abacus embodies binary logic at a human scale. A bead is either in the up position or the down position, engaged or not, representing a 1 or a 0 in a physical system. The act of carrying a value over to the next rod when a sum exceeds 9 is a manual execution of an overflow function, a core operation in any digital circuit. For centuries, this was the fastest calculating device on Earth, essential for trade, engineering, and astronomy from ancient markets to medieval treasuries. It predicted not the silicon chip, but the indispensable need for rapid, reliable data processing itself. It proved that complex mathematics could be broken down into a series of simple, repeatable steps performed on a structured interface. This is the essence of an algorithm. When Charles Babbage sketched his analytical engine in the 19th century, the first conception of a programmable mechanical computer, he was conceptually extending the abacus into automation, replacing human fingers with gears and punch cards. Every modern computer at its heart still performs the same core task as that ancient bead frame. It stores values in a defined location and follows a set of instructions to change them. The abacus was our first tangible step into a universe where information could be not just recorded, but dynamically processed, setting the stage for a world where logic itself would become the most powerful tool we ever built. Centuries before factories filled with the roar of machinery, a single invention in Alexandria proved steam could set the world in motion. In the 1st century of the Common Era, the mathematician and engineer Hero of Alexandria designed a device he called an eolipile. Its design was elegant in its simplicity. A sealed water vessel was placed over a fire. Rising from this boiler were 2 pipes that fed steam into a hollow bronze sphere, which was mounted so it could freely rotate. 2 more bent tubes, like small elbows, protruded from opposite sides of the sphere. When the water boiled, steam rushed through the pipes into the sphere and then shot out forcefully from the bent tubes. The reaction force of these escaping jets caused the entire sphere to spin, whirling rapidly on its axis. It was a pure working steam turbine. For Hero and his contemporaries, however, this was not an engine to drive industry. It was a temple wonder, a philosophical toy, a demonstration of the principles of air and motion. Historical accounts suggest it might have been used to animate temple doors or to create surprising effects during religious ceremonies, a magical trick powered by physics. They saw the potential for spectacle, but not for revolution. Yet, in that spinning sphere lies one of history's most poignant what-ifs. Hero's device contained every core principle necessary for a steam engine. It proved that steam under pressure could create rotary motion, the very foundation of mechanical work. The missing piece was not understanding but application. The ancient world, with its abundant slave labor, lacked the economic imperative to replace human muscle with machine power on a massive scale. The eolipile was a seed planted in soil not yet ready to receive it. It would take nearly 1,700 years for that seed to finally sprout. When Thomas Newcomen built his atmospheric engine in 1712 to pump water from English mines, and later when James Watt vastly improved its efficiency, they were walking a path first cleared by Hero. The eolipile was a direct, functional prediction of the steam engine, and by extension, the entire industrial revolution that would reshape continents, economies, and human life. It stands as a monument not to Greek ignorance but to a different kind of vision. They mastered the how, but the world around them had not yet conceived the why. The power to transform society was right there, hissing and spinning in a temple courtyard, waiting for a future that would finally hear its call. The hiss of steam gave way to a sound that could shatter worlds. In the frozen halls of Norse myth, guarding the rainbow bridge Bifrost, stands the watchman Heimdall. His senses are so sharp he can hear grass growing on earth and wool growing on sheep, but his most famous tool is not a sword or a shield. It is a horn, Jijala horn, whose name means yelling horn or resounding horn. This is no ordinary battle trumpet. The myths state that when Heimdall puts Jijala horn to his lips and blows with all his might, its sound will reverberate through every branch of the world tree Yggdrasil. It will be heard in the misty realm of the giants, in the dark underworld of hell, and in the golden halls of the gods themselves. This single blast is the irrevocable signal that Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods and the end of the current cosmic cycle, has begun. Every being in all the 9 worlds will hear the call to final battle at the same moment. This is a mythological prediction of instantaneous, universal communication. The ancient Norse poets imagined a device that could bypass distance and geography entirely, delivering one urgent message to every corner of a vast, interconnected cosmos. They conceived of a network where a signal generated at one specific point could be received everywhere simultaneously. Today, we have built that network. When a national emergency alert buzzes on every smartphone in a country at once, that is Jijala horn. When a satellite broadcasts a television signal across an entire continent, that is Jijala horn. The horn's purpose as a warning system for an existential threat mirrors our own amber alerts or tsunami warnings, systems designed to cut through the noise of daily life with a blast of vital information. The myth even hints at the infrastructure required. Heimdall stands at the bridge Bifrost, the connection between realms, just as our communication towers and satellite ground stations stand at the nodal points of our global network. In envisioning a horn whose sound defies the limitations of physical space, the Norse myths predicted the core dream of modern telecommunications: to make the world so small and our connections so immediate that a single voice can indeed reach everyone, everywhere, in the very same instant. Gold was not just wealth to the alchemist, it was a state of perfection. For over 1,000 years, across cultures from Alexandria to medieval Europe and China, practitioners of alchemy pursued two legendary goals: the creation of the philosopher's stone, a substance that could transmute base metals like lead into pure gold, and the discovery of the elixir of life, a potion that could grant immortality. To the modern eye, this seems like pure mysticism, the stuff of fairy tales and charlatans, but to dismiss it is to miss the profound science hidden within the symbolism. Alchemists were the first systematic experimental chemists. Their laboratories were filled with alembics, retorts, and crucibles. They meticulously recorded processes of distillation, sublimation, and calcination, giving us terms we still use today. They discovered and purified elements like arsenic and phosphorus. They created strong mineral acids like aqua regia, capable of dissolving even gold itself. The quest to make gold was not merely about greed. In their worldview, metals grew and matured inside the earth, with lead being an immature, sickly metal and gold being the perfect, healthy, mature state. Transmutation was therefore a process of healing and perfecting matter, of accelerating nature's own work. They believed the philosopher's stone was not just a physical catalyst, but a key to understanding the fundamental unity of all substance. In this, they predicted one of the most staggering truths of modern physics. We now know that transmutation is not only possible, it is the engine of the cosmos. Inside stars, nuclear fusion transforms hydrogen into helium and eventually into heavier elements like carbon, oxygen, and iron. In our laboratories, nuclear fission and particle accelerators can indeed change one element into another. We transmute elements every day, not with a mystical stone, but with immense energy, proving the alchemist's core premise that the building blocks of matter are not fixed but convertible. Their second great quest, the elixir of life, followed a similar path from metaphor to reality. Their search involved experiments with minerals, plants, and distillates aimed at purifying the human body and spirit, seeking a panacea or universal medicine. While no magical potion was found, this relentless drive to conquer disease and decay laid the very foundation for modern pharmacology and medical science. Today, we synthesize compounds that target specific diseases, we develop vaccines that extend life by decades, and we research genetic and cellular therapies that aim to slow aging itself. The dream of a life-extending elixir is no longer mystical. It is a multi-billion-dollar scientific enterprise. Alchemy, therefore, was not a failure. It was a magnificent prediction clothed in allegory. It foresaw humanity's drive to master matter at its most fundamental level and to conquer the limitations of the mortal body. The alchemists, with their cryptic symbols and smoky labs, were asking the ultimate questions: what are we made of, and can we make it better? We are still asking those questions, only now we call the answers nuclear physics and biomedical engineering. The stone was not a rock, but the revelation that everything is connected, and that with enough knowledge we truly can transform the world. From the alchemist's smoky crucible, we step into the clean, salt air of the Mediterranean, where another ancient wonder turned science into salvation. The coast of Egypt near the Nile Delta was a graveyard of ships, its shallow waters and hidden sandbars a nightmare for any mariner. To conquer this darkness, Ptolemy I ordered a structure so bold it would become the archetype for every guiding light to follow, the Lighthouse of Alexandria. Built on the small island of Pharos around 280 before the Common Era, It soared to a height modern scholars estimate at over 350 feet, making it one of the tallest man-made structures in the world for centuries. But its true genius was not in its staggering scale alone, but in the brilliant technology housed at its summit. Ancient accounts describe a massive, polished bronze mirror. By day, this mirror would catch the sun and reflect its beam far out to sea, a dazzling pillar of light visible for dozens of miles. By night, the keepers would light an enormous furnace, and that same mirror would now reflect and project the fire's glow, transforming a simple flame into a focused, penetrating beacon that cut through the blackest maritime darkness. This was not a passive tower with a fire on top. It was an active optical system, a colossal projector designed to amplify and direct light with purpose. For the first time in history, sailors had a fixed, reliable point of reference that existed independent of the stars or landmarks. They could triangulate their position, avoid the deadly coastline, and find the harbor mouth in a storm. The pharaohs did more than prevent shipwrecks. It enabled predictable, safe trade across the entire Mediterranean, binding the ancient world together. In this single structure, we see the complete prediction of all modern navigation systems. The lighthouse is the direct ancestor of every coastal beacon that followed, but its conceptual reach is far greater. Its mirror, creating a daytime signal, prefigures the radio beacon, an invisible, constant signal emitted for direction finding. The very idea of a fixed, artificial reference point you can trust absolutely is the foundational principle of the global positioning system. Our satellites are nothing more than lighthouses in the sky, broadcasting their precise positions so our devices can triangulate our location on the open sea of the planet. The engineers of Alexandria, stacking stone and polishing bronze, built more than a wonder. They built the first node in a global network of guidance, a promise that humanity would not be lost in the dark, whether on water, land, or in the vast emptiness of space. The ancient Maya did not simply watch the sky, they calculated it. Deep in the rainforests of Mesoamerica, a civilization flourished with a mind for mathematics and time so precise it borders on the obsessive. While Europe languished in the early Middle Ages, Mayan astronomers were tracking the cycles of celestial bodies with an accuracy that would not be matched in the Old World for centuries. Their obsession was not just philosophical, it was practical and profound, rooted in the belief that time itself was divine and cyclical, and that by understanding its patterns they could align their world with the cosmos. At the heart of this system was the Mayan long count calendar, a masterpiece of numerical architecture. Unlike our linear Gregorian calendar, the long count was designed to measure vast, uninterrupted stretches of time from a fixed starting point. A mythical day zero they placed in August of the year 3114 before the Common Era. This calendar counted days in nested cycles based on the number 20, their visionaries system. They had the kin or day, then the unal, a 20-day month, the ton, a 360-day year, the katon, 20 tons, and the bakton, 20 katons, a cycle of about 394 of our years. This allowed them to pinpoint any day across millennia with unambiguous clarity, a feat of chronological engineering we take for granted in our digital date stamps, but which was revolutionary in the ancient world. To power this immense temporal engine, the Maya needed a mathematical breakthrough, and they found it in the concept of nothing. They developed one of the earliest known uses of a true zero, represented by a shell glyph, as a placeholder in their positional numbering system. This was not just a blank space, it was a number with value and function, allowing for the elegant expression of large numbers and complex calculations. With this tool, they could compute astronomical periods that stretched far beyond a human lifespan. Their most stunning achievement was tracking the planet Venus. They calculated its synodic period, the time it takes to return to the same point relative to the Sun as seen from Earth, as 584 days. Our modern measurement is 583.92 days. Their error was less than 1 day over 500 years of observation. They crafted entire almanacs like the Dresden Codex, dedicated to predicting Venus's appearances as the morning and evening star, timing wars and royal ceremonies to its ominous, brilliant cycle. They did the same for Mars, Jupiter, and solar eclipses, weaving a complex web of interlocking cycles. This was not mere stargazing, it was data processing on a grand scale. Their calendar systems, with their precise constants and correction factors, functioned like sophisticated astronomical software. You could input a date, and the system would output the expected positions of key celestial bodies, the associated deities, and the recommended rituals. It modeled time as a multi-layered, predictable program. In this, the Maya predicted the very essence of modern computational astronomy and the calendar apps on our phones. When your digital calendar reminds you of a phase of the moon or alerts you to a meteor shower, it is running on the same principle the Maya encoded in stone and bark paper. That time and the heavens are a calculable system, and that by mapping their rhythms we can navigate our place within the cosmos. They built a clock for the ages, and in its relentless, accurate tick, we hear the early pulse of a world governed by code. A lump of lifeless clay awaits its creator's command. In the mystical traditions of Jewish folklore, particularly from medieval Prague, we find the legend of the golem. This is not a creature born of flesh and blood, but a being sculpted from the raw earth of a riverbank, a humanoid form shaped by a learned rabbi, often the Maharal of Prague, to protect the Jewish community from persecution. Its animation was a sacred, terrifying act. The rabbi would inscribe a sacred word, a shem, on a piece of parchment or a clay tablet. This word was one of the secret names of God. He would then place this talisman into the golem's mouth or sometimes on its forehead, imbuing the inert matter with a crude semblance of life. The golem would rise, a giant of mud and clay, and obey. Its purpose was clear and programmed: to patrol the ghetto walls, to perform heavy labor, or to defend against threats. It followed its commands with literal, unwavering focus, a perfect servant. But therein lay the peril. The golem had no mind of its own, no conscience or ability to interpret nuance. In one famous version of the tale, the rabbi's wife, thinking to be helpful, commanded the golem to fetch water. It obeyed so perfectly and relentlessly that it nearly flooded the house, continuing to haul water until the rabbi intervened and stopped it. In other tellings, the golem, once set in motion, grows stronger each day, eventually becoming violent and uncontrollable, a force of pure power without a moral compass. The only way to deactivate it is to reverse the ritual, to remove the sacred name from its mouth, returning it to an inert pile of clay. This ancient story is a breathtakingly precise prediction of robotics, artificial intelligence, and the core ethical dilemma of creation. The golem is a programmable entity. Its shem is the source code, the written instructions that bring a system to life. Its single-minded obedience to literal commands mirrors the behavior of early computers and modern algorithms that execute tasks exactly as programmed without understanding context or consequence. The legend directly anticipates Asimov's famous 3 laws of robotics, exploring what happens when a powerful automaton is given a directive it cannot wisely interpret. More profoundly, the golem myth grapples with the responsibility of the creator. It asks, what duty do we owe to the things we bring into being, and what happens when our creation develops a will or a flaw in its programming that we can no longer control? Every discussion about autonomous weapons, about AI safety protocols, and about the off switch for advanced artificial intelligence is a modern retelling of the golem story. We are still the rabbi, shaping our own clay from silicon and code, inscribing it with our own digital shem, and hoping we remember how to remove the word before the river of consequences floods our world. The golem's clay was shaped by human hands, but its animation came from a word, a fundamental instruction. This ancient drive to define the building blocks of existence found its purest expression not in a workshop but in a philosopher's mind. In the 5th century before the Common Era, two Greek thinkers, Leucippus and his student Democritus, proposed a radical idea that would echo through the ages. They looked at the world around them, the solidity of a rock, the fluidity of water, the diffusion of smoke, and asked a simple, profound question. If you take any piece of matter and cut it in half, and then cut that half in half, could you do so forever? Their answer was no. They reasoned that there must be a point where you reach a particle so small it could no longer be divided. They called this ultimate, indivisible fragment atomos, meaning uncuttable or indivisible. This was not a laboratory discovery. It was a breathtaking leap of logic, a philosophical theory born from pure reason. Democritus imagined a universe where everything was composed of these invisible atoms and the void, the empty space between them. He proposed that the atoms themselves were eternal and unchangeable, but that their different shapes, sizes, and arrangements were what gave rise to all the variety in the material world. The sweet taste of honey, he suggested, might be caused by smooth, round atoms, while the bitterness of a lemon came from sharp, jagged ones. The solidity of iron was due to atoms that hooked together tightly, while the volatility of fire or scent was made of tiny, fast-moving particles that could easily disperse. This atomic theory was a magnificent, coherent vision of a mechanistic cosmos. Yet, it was a vision that would be almost entirely forgotten for 2,000 years. Why? Because it was directly opposed by the towering intellectual authority of Aristotle. Aristotle rejected the idea of a void and of indivisible particles. He championed the view that all matter was composed of four fundamental elements: earth, air, fire, and water, and that their properties came from qualities like hot, cold, wet, and dry. This view was more intuitive, more aligned with sensory experience, and it became the dominant scientific paradigm in Western and Islamic thought for centuries. Alchemists would toil under this framework, trying to adjust the balance of these elements and qualities. The clean, mechanistic universe of Democritus was buried under a mountain of Aristotelian philosophy. Its revival had to wait for the scientific revolution. When John Dalton formulated his modern atomic theory in the early 1800s, he provided the experimental evidence that Democritus lacked, but the core conceptual breakthrough was identical. All matter is composed of tiny, indivisible particles called atoms. Chemical reactions are rearrangements of these atoms. The properties of a substance depend on the type and arrangement of its atoms. Democritus had predicted all of this with his mind alone. His theory goes even further, foreshadowing the dizzying frontiers of modern particle physics. His idea that atoms might have different shapes and could hook together prefigures our understanding of molecular bonds and crystal structures. The concept that everything, even the human soul, might be composed of physical atoms anticipates the materialist foundations of neuroscience. And the very name atomos, the indivisible, holds a beautiful irony. We now know atoms can be split, revealing a subatomic world of protons, neutrons, and quarks. Yet, in naming the fundamental unit, Democritus predicted the entire direction of scientific inquiry, the relentless search for the smallest, most basic components of reality. From a philosophical hunch in ancient Greece to the massive particle colliders of today, the journey to understand what we are made of began with a simple, unprovable, and utterly correct idea whispered into the void. The quest to understand the atom was a journey inward, but the dream of reaching the stars demanded a force that could propel us outward. That explosive force first bloomed not in a laboratory, but in the alchemical fires of Tang Dynasty China, sometime around the 9th century. Seeking an elixir for immortality, Taoist alchemists mixed sulfur, charcoal, and a saltpeter they called earth snow. Instead of creating life, they unleashed a thunderous power capable of ending it. This was the birth of gunpowder, the world's first chemical explosive. Initially, its use was more mystical than military. employed in fireworks and noisemakers to scare away evil spirits with its brilliant flashes and deafening roars. But the potential for propulsion was inherent in its very nature. A confined explosion creates a rapid expansion of hot gas, and that gas, seeking any path to escape, can generate tremendous thrust. By the 11th century, Chinese military engineers had harnessed this principle in a terrifying new weapon, the fire arrow. This was not simply an arrow dipped in flame. It was a sophisticated delivery system. A tube of gunpowder was strapped to the shaft of an arrow near its head. When ignited, the tube did not just burn, it exploded, shooting a jet of flame and gas out its open end. This reactive force acted like a crude rocket engine, propelling the arrow farther, faster, and with more devastating impact than any bow could achieve. It was a weapon that moved under its own power. This concept rapidly evolved. By the 13th century, during the Song dynasty's wars against the Mongols, records describe true rocket-like devices. These were tubes packed with gunpowder, sealed at one end and left open at the other, attached to a stabilizing stick. Lit from the sealed end, the burning powder forced jets of gas from the open end, launching the tube itself screaming through the air. Used in barrages, these early rockets were psychological weapons of chaos, streaking through the sky with fiery tails and raining down explosive terror. Yet, even in warfare, the celebratory heart of the technology remained. Elaborate ground rats and fire trees used these same rocket principles for spectacular public displays, spinning and shooting across courtyards in patterns of light and sound. In these simple bamboo tubes, we see the complete functional prediction of reaction propulsion, Sir Isaac Newton's third law of motion, made manifest in fire and smoke centuries before he would formally define it. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. The gas rushing out one direction forces the rocket to move in the other. Every modern rocket, from the small fireworks that light up our holidays to the colossal boosters that lift astronauts toward the moon, operates on this exact principle first demonstrated on Chinese battlefields and in festival skies. The intercontinental ballistic missile and the space launch vehicle share a direct fiery lineage with those ancient fire arrows. The dream of reaching beyond our world began not with a calculated equation on a chalkboard, but with the accidental, earth-shaking discovery of a powder that could turn a simple arrow into a self-propelled messenger of fire, pointing the way, however violently, to the heavens. Death is the oldest human fear, and our oldest stories are attempts to outrun it. In the dusty ruins of ancient Mesopotamia, on crumbling clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform, we find the world's first great epic, the story of Gilgamesh. He is a king, two-thirds god and one-third man, whose strength and arrogance know no bounds. But his journey truly begins with a devastating loss, the death of his beloved friend Enkidu. This grief shatters Gilgamesh's immortal arrogance and plants a desperate, singular obsession in his heart. If his brother-in-arms could die, so could he. He abandons his throne and sets out on a perilous quest, not for glory or treasure, but for the one thing that can silence his terror, immortality. His travels take him to the ends of the known world, across the waters of death, and finally to the ancient sage Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian Noah who survived the Great Flood and was granted eternal life by the gods. Utnapishtim tells Gilgamesh there is no gift for him, but he does reveal a secret. At the bottom of the sea, there grows a plant, a thorny coral-like herb that can restore a man's youth. Gilgamesh, with stones tied to his feet, dives into the abyss, retrieves the plant, and holds in his hands the very secret of rejuvenation. He plans to take it home, to share it with the elders of his city, to make all of humanity young again. But on his journey back, he stops to bathe in a cool pool, leaving the plant unattended on the shore. A serpent, drawn by its scent, slithers up, eats the plant, and immediately sheds its skin, reborn. Gilgamesh is left weeping on the bank, his prize stolen, his quest ended in bitter failure. For thousands of years, this has been read as a simple fable about accepting mortality, about the futility of defying the natural order. But look closer, the quest itself, the very premise of the story, is a staggering prediction. Gilgamesh did not seek a magical spell or a god's favor. He sought a physical, biological substance, a plant with properties that could reverse the cellular process of aging. He was not praying for an afterlife, he was searching for a cure. This is not mysticism, it is proto-science. The epic frames the conquest of aging as a problem to be solved through exploration, knowledge, and sheer force of will. It imagines a world where death is not a spiritual destiny but a biological condition, and conditions can be treated. In that dive to the ocean floor, we see the first glimmer of modern biotechnology. Today, that quest is no longer a myth. It is a multi-billion-dollar scientific frontier. Researchers are not diving for mythical plants, but they are searching for the biological equivalents. They study the genetics of long-lived species like the naked mole rat. They investigate cellular repair mechanisms. They experiment with drugs that can clear out senescent or zombie cells that accumulate as we age. The field of gerontology treats aging not as a single inevitability, but as a collection of malleable processes: telomere shortening, protein cross-linking, mitochondrial dysfunction. Concepts like gene editing with CRISPR and therapeutic cloning are the modern tools for the same ancient goal: to repair, replace, or rejuvenate the body from within. Gilgamesh wept for a lost plant, but he established the blueprint. He defined the human desire not just to live long, but to live young, to reset the clock. That desire now fuels laboratories where scientists work on inducing cellular pluripotency, essentially turning back the clock on adult cells to make them young again. The serpent that stole the plant and renewed itself by shedding its skin is perhaps the most poignant symbol of all. It is nature itself demonstrating the very renewal Gilgamesh sought. A reminder that the secret is written into the biology of the world around us, waiting to be decoded. The Epic of Gilgamesh is not a story about giving up. It is a story about starting the search. Every time a scientist sequences a longevity gene or tests a new anti-aging compound, they are walking the path Gilgamesh first carved beside the river, still reaching for that thorny plant at the bottom of the sea, believing that this time we might just make it back to shore. The serpent stole youth, but humanity never stopped chasing the sun's shadow to mark its passage. In the very heart of ancient Egypt, time itself was carved from a single block of stone. The great obelisks, those towering needles of red granite piercing the sky, were far more than monuments to pharaohs. They were colossal, stationary sundials. Their precise, tapered shape and polished faces cast a long, sharp shadow that swept across the ground in a perfect, predictable arc from sunrise to sunset. Priests and officials could watch that dark finger move across marked pavements, dividing the daylight into hours, turning the slow dance of the earth into a visible, measurable track. This was timekeeping on a monumental scale, a public clock that anchored the entire rhythm of civic and religious life to the celestial mechanics overhead. But the sun's time was not always so stationary. For travelers, merchants, and soldiers, time needed to be portable. The Egyptians, and later the Greeks and Romans, refined the concept into handheld sundials. Imagine a small, flat disc of bronze or stone, often fitting in the palm of your hand. On its surface was inscribed a network of lines radiating from a central point where a small metal gnomon or pointer stood upright. You would orient the dial so the gnomon pointed north, and its shadow would fall across the lines, indicating the hour. These were personal devices, some even worn as rings, allowing an individual to carry a piece of the cosmic order with them. The Romans in particular became masters of this portable time, with intricate designs that accounted for the changing length of daylight across different seasons and even latitudes. This was not merely a convenience. It represented a fundamental cognitive leap, the drive to standardize something as fluid and subjective as the passage of day. By tethering human activity to the consistent motion of a shadow, these cultures were imposing order on chaos, creating a shared framework for commerce, law, and social coordination. The shadow of an obelisk predicted the very architecture of modern life. That simple, moving line of darkness is the direct ancestor of every intricate gear in a medieval cathedral clock, every oscillating pendulum in a grandfather clock, and every vibrating quartz crystal in a wristwatch. The need to synchronize across distances led from local solar time to the creation of standardized time zones in the 19th century, a global network of agreed-upon hours that allows trains to run and markets to open in coordinated harmony. And today, when your smartphone automatically updates for daylight saving time or syncs to an atomic clock signal beamed from a satellite, it is fulfilling the ancient promise first etched in stone and bronze, that time is not a mystery but a system. It is a system we can measure, divide, and share, a universal language first spoken by a shadow crawling across the sand. But the most profound prediction of reality itself was not carved in stone or written in myth. It was a thought experiment sketched in the mind of a Greek philosopher over 2,000 years ago. Plato, in his work The Republic, presents the allegory of the cave, a story of perception so powerful it seems to describe our digital age with eerie precision. He asks us to envision prisoners chained from birth deep inside a cavern. They are bound so they can only stare straight ahead at a blank wall. Behind them, a fire burns, and between the fire and the prisoners, people carry various objects, statues of animals, wooden figures, all sorts of things. The fire casts the shadows of these objects onto the wall the prisoners face. For these captives, those flickering shadows are the sum total of reality. They name the shadows, discuss them, believe in them completely. They have no conception of the three-dimensional objects or the fire or the sunlight outside the cave. Then Plato imagines one prisoner is freed. He is forced to turn around to see the fire and the objects themselves. At first, the light hurts his eyes and the real objects seem less clear than the familiar shadows. He is confused, in pain. He might even want to return to his chains, but then he is dragged further out of the cave entirely, into the blinding light of the sun. Slowly, his eyes adjust. He sees the true forms of things, real trees, real animals, the sun itself. He understands that his entire life was spent watching a poor imitation of reality. Filled with pity, he returns to the cave to tell the others, but back in the darkness his eyes are now blind. The other prisoners, seeing his stumbling and hearing his wild tales of a world outside, conclude that leaving the cave ruins you. They would rather kill the messenger than accept his unsettling truth. This is not just a lesson about education or philosophy. It is a stunningly precise prediction of mediated experience and virtual reality. The cave wall is our screen. The shadows are the curated images, the news feeds, the movies and video games we consume. The fire and the puppeteers are the creators of that content. The filmmakers, the programmers, the algorithms that decide what we see. We, the modern audience, are often those prisoners, taking the two-dimensional representations on our screens for a complete picture of the world. Plato's allegory goes further, predicting the very essence of immersive technology. Virtual reality headsets and advanced simulations are the ultimate manifestation of the cave. They do not just show us shadows, they surround us with them, convincing our senses that the digital illusion is our entire world. We willingly put on the chains of the headset to experience a crafted reality, but Plato's deepest warning was about the difficulty of discerning truth once you are accustomed to the simulation. The prisoner who saw the sun struggled to readjust to the darkness, just as someone emerging from a deep virtual experience or a social media bubble might find the real world jarring, complex, and unsatisfying. The allegory even foreshadows modern simulation theory, the idea proposed by thinkers like Nick Bostrom that our entire universe might be an artificial construct, a sophisticated cave created by a more advanced civilization. Are we the prisoners or are we the shadows? Plato's ancient story forces the question we are now grappling with technologically. What happens when the imitation becomes more compelling, more comfortable than the original? It suggests that the greatest challenge of our future may not be building better simulations, but remembering how to find the exit and having the courage to walk out into the sometimes painful but utterly real light. From ancient computers to self-healing concrete, from dreams of flight to the blueprint for atomic theory, we have journeyed across 25 astonishing visions. These are not mere curiosities, they are the scattered pieces of a grand puzzle about human imagination itself. Some, like the Antikythera mechanism or Zhang Heng's seismoscope, were literal, functioning machines, proof that certain technological paths were discovered, lost, and rediscovered. Others, like Plato's cave or the golem, were conceptual leaps, frameworks for ideas like virtual reality and artificial intelligence centuries before the hardware could exist. And still others, like the Norse Gjallarhorn or the Mayan calendars, were metaphorical expressions of deep human needs for communication, for understanding time, that we later fulfilled with engineering. So what do these echoes from the past truly represent? Are they lucky guesses, the result of brilliant minds independently stumbling upon universal truths? Are they profound insights into the inevitable direction of invention, a kind of technological destiny written into the fabric of human curiosity? Or is it simply our own pattern-seeking minds, looking back and connecting dots that were never meant to be connected, projecting our modern world onto ancient symbols? Perhaps the answer is all of the above. Each case is a reminder that genius is not confined to any one era. The drive to calculate, to fly, to communicate, to heal, and to understand our place in the cosmos is a constant thread in the human story. These ancient predictions show us that the seeds of our greatest inventions were often planted in the soil of myth, philosophy, and careful observation long ago. They whisper that innovation is less about creating something from nothing and more about nurturing a perennial idea until the world is finally ready to bring it to life. This leads us to a final, irresistible question. If the past is filled with predictions of our present, what does our present predict for the distant future? The technologies we are pioneering today, quantum computing, genetic engineering, neural interfaces, space colonization, will they seem like obvious, inevitable steps to historians 1,000 years from now? Or are we, right now, crafting the myths and prototypes that will one day be seen as ancient predictions of a world we can barely imagine? The spiral of history turns. We are both the inheritors of ancient dreams and the dreamers whose visions will one day be called ancient. What do you think we are predicting right now? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through the echoes of invention, be sure to like this video and subscribe for more explorations into history's greatest mysteries.